Good morning. It's Dr. Dina, Innovator in Health and Wellness, and it's October 5th, 2020, here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's about 10 degrees and raining, so it's a little chilly, but a great day to kind of share my heart. I've been away from Facebook Live for a little while, busy setting up with some great friends, the Atlantic Common Law Assembly that I'll tell you about later, but I've just had so many great messages and videos, and I still appreciate you being here. It's challenging to kind of get back to everybody right away, but I'm grateful for you and grateful for the followers on the page, and again, people that send me information and research. We're a team working together, so know I appreciate you even if I don't get back to you right away. What am I going to talk about today? I think I'd start with a Rumi quote, that the wound is the place where the light enters. The wound is the place where the light enters. So right now we're feeling the wounds of the world. And I ask you to kind of look at it as an opportunity for greater growth, for greater awareness, and to allow the light in. So today is a video particular to those who are still believing we have a global viral pandemic, and maybe if I can share some history on where we've been and you understand where we are, it'll help us design a path, a vision forward on where we're going. Let me see if I can pin that up there. There we go. So what do I want to talk about first? Once upon a time, there were some rich old men, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, J.P. Morgan, the guy that sunk the Titanic, his own boat to get insurance. There's a lot of different conspiracy and, let's say, hidden history that won't be in the history books, but there are books. The President Makers is a great one where I learned a lot about that. Thank you, Howard, for sending me that book. But these group of men, feeling very low and insecure about themselves, had to come off as being sort of powerful and over-controlling. And, that's what happens, because when you're feeling confident and filled with love and grace, you want to empower others. You don't try to pull them down. But anyway, these group of men who were feeling very insecure about themselves needed to take over the world. So, they started with the railway and the steel, and then, our currency, and drove the currency, and then they took over our medicine, right? In 1910, you'll see the Flexner report, how they went in and they hijacked the medical school. So medicine then wasn't about holistic healing and nutrition. It became a drug pharmaceutical pushing business, under the direction of these few different individuals that were feeling, again, very not having good self-esteem, let's say, about themselves. But they took over the media then. They bought out the media because the media was their biggest obstacle. They bought out the media so they'd have a mouthpiece. They didn't like people speaking up. They didn't like the unions coming against them, other businesses that they were putting out of business at that time, right, to have the monopoly on steel, for example, start speaking against them. So they figured if they bought out the media, no one would hear the story, would hear the truth. And then they bought out governments, and we know that, right, because of what's happening in the world right now today. So if you look back kind of at our recent history, I always say this, and you've heard it before, then you can tune me out, but some people haven't. In 1986, they passed this vaccine bill that absolves vaccine companies of any liability, death, and disease. Then in 1996, they passed the Telecom Act, which absolves telecom companies, cellular companies, from any liability, death, because cellular technology is dangerous, right, for your health. People that use a cell phone have more cancers on this side of their head. We're seeing now an increase in children's cancers, especially brain and thyroid and testes, because of the phones, right, where they hold the phones. So this is a big concern too, the radiation. But anyway, that was a Telecom Act in 1996. See, they knew it was going to cause injuries, so the government had to put these measures, these acts in place to protect the big companies, not protecting you. And then in 2013, Obama passed the Monsanto Act. So Monsanto, this group of companies that genetically modify our foods, that spray it then with glyphosate. So they genetically modify it so it can withstand the poison glyphosate, which is a water-soluble poison. And so they put their own act in government. So to protect, again, the company from liability, when they start causing, these tumors, right? The 300% growth in tumors in rats, a 50% death rate in female rats that are exposed to this glyphosate. So they knew it was going to cause problems, but they just had to protect themselves, right? Against the public having awareness and then litigating these issues. So we know that this group, has taken over the governments. And, there's different names for that small little group, right? You could call them Freemasons, world elite, unilluminated elite, I would like to say, criminals, again, crimes against humanity. I mean, they have different names, but there's a video that I'd like to post, and it's about a secret creed of the Freemasons. And they have, talked about what they would do to us. Put metals in our teeth, right, in the way of mercury in the fillings. They would poison our foods, poison our water. They would sell us medicines. They said this. They would sell us medicines under the guise of health, but it would actually cause disease. So we've seen their agenda play out. But at the end of that video, it's quite depressing to listen to, but if you listen to the end, it's encouraging, because it says the greatest fear, the greatest, the one thing that can overturn this agenda that they have for our humanity is you waking up. It's knowledge. It's you understanding, right? So what's happening right now, when they call it a great awakening, we're starting to wake up to these agendas. We're not believing the narrative that they've bought and sold to you. We're starting to wake up to a new way of living, a new way of thinking, a new paradigm. And this is how we shift it. This is what's going to turn it around. So the one world government, Agenda 2030. If you don't know about that, I'd ask you to go look it up. Rosa Coire, Coire. Because this is part of their agenda, to kind of regionalize, bring people into a small space so they can be easily controlled. The same thing, these group of wealthy people right at the top of the barrel are the ones that are also into chemicals of all sorts. So the GMO, genetically modified organisms or foods, again with glyphosate, but they're also spraying chemicals in the air. So Bill Gates, if you don't know, he patented the virus. Him and the Queen and the UN and the World Health Organization had made this virus, and now they have their money invested in selling you the antivirus, right? Typical of a computer operator, the antivirus in the way of a vaccine. So, but these group, they control the chemicals, right? So the chemicals in the food, the chemicals in our water, fluoride and chlorine were actually, they're actually waste products from, industrial places, right? Industrial metals. So they're listed in the Lancet, the British Medical Journal, as being neurotoxic. So you have to be filtering your water, trying to eat organic, grow your own food, even better. But and then they spray chemicals in the air. So Bill Gates also, sent up chemicals and had this experiment last year, the spring of 2019, to try to block the sun. So, but this is how they sold it to you, was under the guise of climate change. They even hired little Greta to come out. Little Greta, she's suddenly a meteorologist, right? So funny. Oh, it's climate change. So they can kind of tax business, and they can scare you, once again, into allowing them to spray chemicals into our air. Chemtrails. Geoengineering.org is a great website. And thank you, Corey. I don't know if you're watching, but Corey had shared lots of great information. I know what I know now because of you, right? We're sharing information. We're working as a team, and that information is available to all of us. We just have to be open to it, and we just have to take responsibility for our own learning. Because if you're just watching CBC and TCTV, you're going to think we're having a virus pandemic. You're going to be wearing a mask, and you're going to be afraid. You're going to be having tremendous anxiety. So step one into kind of reducing your anxiety and increasing your health is turn off mainstream news, right? Start researching for yourself and kind of know these things. So again, these group of people, the GMO, genetically modified foods, pharmaceuticals, they're into pharmaceutical sales and the guise of health, but actually making you worse. And many different things, right? Even simple things like the statin drugs, right? We need cholesterol, right? The statin drug. The whole idea of cholesterol and diabetes is really just eating too much sugar. It's carbohydrates. And William Davis of Wheat Belly says that. I mean, there's many authors that just talk about the detrimental effects. Weston Price even, right? The natives were fine until they bought them in bread, and then they start rotting their teeth and having all these chronic diseases. So there's many people that talk about that, but the medicines are even more detrimental. So a statin drug suppresses fat. Good fat. Your brain is 25% fat. So what they're saying, they're feeding people okay. So a diabetic diet includes carbohydrates and bread. So they're feeding them the bread, increases the sugar, increases kind of chronic disease, and then they sell you the medicine, like the statin drug, to lower your fat. The problem's not the fat, the problem's the sugar. Right? So they feed you the statin drug, which again lowers the brain function, so you have more dementia because the neurons are coated in something called a myelin sheath, or coated in fat. That's how they kind of send messages. So if you decrease that, you're going to have brain problems. You're going to have dementia, and you're going to have problems. So, and again with the vaccines, right? I don't know if you know this. If you're on my Facebook page, you probably do. But I was a chiropractor for 22 years. Loved family practice, but I started to see vaccine injuries more and more and more. And it just broke my heart, see a healthy baby that has all neurological signs are normal, and then suddenly, they're staring, they stop walking or talking, or they have a protruding tongue, or their neurological sign, they've had primitive reflexes return that had disappeared. I mean, just really crazy things. And when I started talking about these dangers, I was silenced. Not only was my license suspended and they fined me, but eventually I had to surrender my license in order to keep talking about this. So I can see the corruption in the health department, and I can see the injections weren't a good thing. There's no safety studies. There's no efficacy studies. They sold you for 100 years on the lie that vaccines were good. And anyway, you need to do this research for yourself, because you won't be convinced. People that already have the belief that if I get the shot, I'm healthy. But just look at this. Just try to jump out of your mind from all that you've been taught and think, if you're born with a healthy baby, why would you need to inject them with chemicals to keep them healthy? Right? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So anyway, that was part of the narrative that they were feeding you, that you believed into, pharmaceuticals. So whether it's medications or whether it's injections in the way of vaccines, health doesn't come from a bottle, a pill, or an injection, right? Health comes from your behavior. And Dane Donahue, a great chiropractor, a friend, he says, you can't, I'm not going to remember. Yes, I will remember it. You can't medicate yourself out of a problem you've behaved your way into. You can't medicate yourself out of a problem you've behaved your way into. Because most of our chronic diseases are just from what you're doing to yourself, right? It's just, a lifestyle and what you're eating. And, you don't really need a lot of the medications if you just kind of turn it around and flip that paradigm. So, but the pharmaceutical companies are trying to sell you health in a bottle or health in a needle. But it's you have to switch that philosophy, or you're going to be sucked in to being fearful of this pandemic, wearing your mask. Oh my God, I feel like I'm on the funny farm. When I go out and I see everyone in a mask, I just want to go over and pull all their masks off and just kind of, teach them that the mask can come off and you won't die. But anyway, this is what we're sold. The chemical story. And then the same people are also in sex trafficking, slavery, these crimes against humanity, because it's their value, right, to control our humanity, and because they're not feeling good about themselves, and they don't have control and feel self-disciplined, they feel like they have to exert that on others. So the sex trafficking business is wild. It's wild. We're not even talking about it right now, but it's a part of what's happening. This is where they get their money. These are billion-dollar businesses: pharmaceutical business, sex trafficking business, genetically modified foods. These are the billion-dollar businesses that keep those guys in power, right? My dear friend, John DeMartini, is a sex trafficked slave. He has to travel all different countries. He's been all different countries around the world. He has a hotel room. They have a lineup of sex trafficking customers waiting at the door. It's beyond me. And we see it in our movie stars. Anybody that is influencing the population, these corrupt group need to get, let's say, blackmail them, or MK Ultra them, which is, mind experiments, or somehow genetically modify them, or put a chip in them, or whatever. They're being controlled. So we have to know that in order to shift the paradigm. Right? We have to know that. So if you know John DeMartini, this is if you scroll down my page, you see a post I did about that, bringing the wounds to the light is what heals them. Right? Some people will say, Dina, how can you do that? Right? He was your friend. You've known him since 2006, and you wrote a book and you quoted the DeMartini process. Yes, I value the work he's brought to humanity, but I can't support the sex trafficking slavery, sex trafficking individuals. This is not what we're here for. That's a crime against our humanity. And if we don't stand up for it, we'll be railroaded by it. Right? You have a choice. You can stand up against it, or you can succumb to the narrative. I choose to stand up against it. People say, well, aren't you afraid? Somebody said to me this morning when I was talking about John DeMartini, he said, well, he lives on the World, and that's a big cruise ship with a lot of money. Aren't you, afraid of being taken out? And I was like, you know what? If I'm taken out, I'll travel light. I'd rather die free than kind of live dead, really, right? Which is what we're doing, smothering ourselves and smothering our kids. How can mothers do that? I mean, how can mothers put their kids in a mask and send them into school where they can be locked down? Okay, so June 2019, June 4th, they amended the Health Protection Act in Nova Scotia to include kidnapping and quarantining your child. I did a whole video about this. This is on the YouTube channel. So the year before, the government was making provisions. They even bought the COVID test kits a year before. Now, that's sickening, isn't it? To think that it was a pandemic. And there's a BitChute has a whole smokescreen of the pandemic, Event 201. I mean, there's lots of information out there that you can research to show that, yes, this was planned by the government. And Bill Gates and the Queen and the World Health Organization were the people that did it. I mean, Bill Gates is the largest contributor to the World Health Organization. They had a 1972 mandate to kill using vaccines. So I'm sorry, if you're just hearing this for the first time, usually I try to kind of break you in gently, but we're running out of time. You need to wake up right now. Take off the friggin' mask, right? And just know these things. And don't be afraid to stand up. I mean, some people, I have friends that kind of understand that the masks aren't good. Millimeter pores in the mask, viruses are dead bits of genetic material that can go in and around the mask. I mean, it's just foolish to think that the masks even help. So why are you doing it? If you know the difference, maybe you're fearful. Maybe you don't want to stand out. Maybe you're just afraid to kind of stand up for your kids. But this is smothering your kids. There's 3 kids that died in Germany because of these masks. When I was in practice, I would take the oxygen saturation rate. There's another YouTube video on this. You can go watch it with a pulse oximeter. And the mask decreases oxygen. When your oxygen decreases, it's an emergency. You're hypoxic. If you go to the hospital like my friend Sammy had to do with her little son Luke, and it's it's below a certain rate, 92 to 80 saturation of oxygen, you need oxygen. They won't let you leave the emergency, but still, they're masking up the kids for 8 hours and reducing the oxygen in their little brains. It's a test. It's a test. It's a test to see who's brainwashed and who's using their critical mind. Because you parents who are sending your kids back into the system that can now quarantine, lock down, remove your kids, test them, inject them without your consent, and put the mask on them are the same parents that will probably be running up to get the vaccine. Like, if you don't stand up for your kids, who's going to? The government's not. They've put the policy in place to protect the vaccine companies, right? So you have to stand up for your kids. And the government, the schools are a corrupt organization, which I'll talk about in just a second. They're part of this crown. So let me get back to the story. So I surrendered my license so I could speak these health truths. And I thought, if I could educate enough of the MLAs, members of Legislative Assembly, and enough of the MPs, members of Parliament, in our government, they just don't know. Because if they knew about these things, about the dangers of vaccines, they wouldn't be allowing these bills. Someone would speak up. This is what I thought. So for 2 years, I've been emailing all the MLAs in Nova Scotia, all the MLAs in New Brunswick. A group of us even went to the New Brunswick legislature when they had a standing committee on Bill 39 when they were trying to mandate vaccines in school. We even went there and spoke. But for 2 years, I haven't had any reply. In fact, Dominic Carty, Minister of Education that was putting through this, just got reelected in New Brunswick. What's with that? Right? How can an education minister know what's best for our kids? Well, if he's bought out by the pharmaceutical company, right, then he already has an agenda. So where was I with that story? So I tried, right? I tried to work within the system, right? I tried to present to MLAs. I tried to present to MPs. And after 2 years, I became quite depressed, actually. I felt like I was banging my head up against the wall. Like, how can we make a change? Aren't these men, you know, these men and women in our governments going to help us? But their hands are tied. Because what one very kind MLA that I met with said, he said, you know, we can talk in our caucus meetings about what our own personal values are, but at the end of the day, we have a whipped vote. We have to come in alignment with whatever the party leaders say. Now, I guess, you know, the Prime Minister would be at the top of that. So let's talk about our government for a moment. This concept of locking down your kids and injecting them, removing them from your home, not a new concept. It's been happening to Indigenous kids since 1874. They've been removing them. They actually gave the Indigenous kids diseases like smallpox in their blankets, injecting, you know, pulling their teeth out without medication, pulling their teeth out without anesthetic, you know, punishing them for speaking their language, removing them from their parents, putting them in residential schools. So Justin Trudeau now is charged with treason with the International Common Law Courts for massive graves in and genocide in BC. So if you want more information on that, murderbydecree.com. Kevin Annette wrote extensively on that, murderbydecree.com. So the residential schools have already been through this. So you see, this is not a new government paradigm. They know what they're doing. They're just switching races now. It's just to us instead of the Indigenous people, right? So where was I with that? So again, I tried to work within the system and tried to wake up kind of the people. So first I sent them information on vaccines, how there's no safety studies and there's all this evidence. childrenshealthdefense.com is a great website, and they've done a 9-part series, I think it is now, of vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. And the vaccinated kids have higher rates of chronic diseases across the board in everything they tested. Not only things like autism, asthma, eczema, learning deficits, but things like juvenile arthritis, other things like irritable bowel syndrome, colitis, ileitis, anything that increases inflammation, right? Because the vaccines, that's what they do. They stimulate your immune system by increasing an inflammatory response. And they have to use adjuvants like heavy metals to get that response. But the crazy thing that I mentioned before was what I was seeing in my practice, you know, just 5 years before I left my practice, I seen all these beautiful girls with beautiful feminine names wanting to be male. I had like 6. Now, I've been in practice 22 years. I had never seen that before. The commonality, and I've even connected with the parents since I've let go of my license, is the Hpv vaccine. They all had the Hpv vaccine, and it came in 2015, I think it was introduced into the school system. Suddenly you see these girls wanting to be men. Now, I don't know exactly, I mean, severely, not just like I feel like I'm a man, but no, I want to get my breast removed, I want to have a mastectomy, I want to go through hormone treatments. Young girls in high school. Suddenly they're changing because of this vaccine. So not only does it cause sterility and all these other diseases, it's changing our DNA structure. Why? I don't know what specific chemical they've put in there, but they do have fetal cells. So if you put fetal cells or stem cells from another species or from another sex, so male fetal cells, for example, in a female body, you're in essence changing, right, the genetic structure. And this new vaccine that they're wanting to put together, this concoction for our COVID-19 vaccine, I'd ask you to kind of read some information on that from the FEMA with Celeste Solomon, and that's on my BitChute channel. I'll see if I can post that in this link too. But she says not only do you have like the heavy metals, the mercury and the aluminum that, you know, the Freemasons said will fool up their brains so they can't think straight, so we can poison them and control them. Not only do they have the heavy metals and things like glyphosate, polysorbate 80, which are toxic chemicals, but they're putting in something called a hydrogel, a DARPA, so it's the Department of Research and Defense. It's a DARPA hydrogel that changes your DNA. So in essence, they can control you then using AI technology, as if they're not controlling you already, right? With the phones, the media. They have the whole world believing we're in a pandemic. I mean, how ridiculous is that? The whole world believes we're in a pandemic. Well, most people are waking up to this, right? But here in Nova Scotia, we've had 64 deaths. 58 of those deaths were at Northwood Health Facility, long-term care facility that is about 500 feet from a new cell tower, and they've all had the flu injection. So if you've had the flu shot, for example, right, you are going to have to test positive because it has a corona sequence in it. The whole PCR test, if you go onto my blog, healthtruth.blog, and there's an article, not the first one, but the second one down is called Masked Truths. I've put all the research information about the PCR test, about the guy who developed the test. He said it was never meant to identify a virus. So I have great difficulty in understanding why they're doing a test when there's no science that shows it's even effective in identifying this virus. Many authors have thought maybe that they're seeding us, right? Because it's the swab goes up your nose into the cribriform plate, that maybe they're seeding us with some sort of nanotechnology, and the actual test could be the vaccine, because they're probably worried that not everybody's going to roll up their vaccine for this experimental, injection, but they have to get you somehow, right? So don't have the test. There's no science to show that the test is effective, that it's useful, or that it's able to even identify this virus. Masked Truths is the name of the article, healthtruth.blog, and you can see I've got a whole section right at the bottom of the PCR test. Go look at it. Go research it. We've talked about masks. 64 deaths. Talked about Northwood, the virus and the testing. So there's the virus. So the virus is dead bits of genetic material. We've had viruses for thousands of years. Dr. Zach Bush talks about that, how the virus actually helps groom our humanity, right? We have to adapt and learn into the environment. So viruses and bacteria, they're a part of the environment. They're a part of us. You see, if you have the basic philosophy that we're a part of a loving matrix, and that what's out there, it's also in you, that what you do to our world and what you do to nature, you're doing to yourself. If you understand we're all connected in that globe, you won't be injecting. You won't be pouring chemicals into our water. You won't be spraying our forests with glyphosate, because you'll understand. Chief Seattle wrote a letter to President of Washington, and every time I read it, it breaks my heart. Opens my heart, not breaks my heart. He talks about how the rivers, are the blood of our brothers, and the air and the wind is the breath of our grandfathers. We have to think about what we're doing today and what we've done in the past to our earth, because when you affect the earth, you're affecting yourself, right? We're killing ourselves. Why? Because we're just ignorant. We just need to wake up and stand up and do something different. So the virus is actually good for us. Any viral material stimulates your immune system. Yes, there's some people that passed on. They were probably going to pass on anyway, right, with something. 58 at Northwood. I wonder how many die there a given year with the flu shot, right? They may have had the flu shot, actually. So the whole idea that this is a pandemic is a scam. So I said this in a video a little while ago. I called it a fake pandemic, and the group Mommies Helping Mommies, I got slammed. Who is this wacko with the fake pandemic? Yes, it's a fake pandemic. 64 deaths is not a pandemic, right? 58 being at a long-term care facility, something fishy about that. So apparently they're doing an investigation, and they're looking at how they may have put people in the same rooms and whatever. I would encourage you to get on the phone right now and connect with our health minister here in Nova Scotia, who's Randy Delory, and also our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Robert Strang, and just say, how many of those deaths at Northwood had the flu shot? And was it from the same batch? Because that's what I really feel, and that's what Dr. Judy Merkovitz talks about, is the flu shot, predisposing people to a vaccine injury and actually injecting the corona sequence. Because a virus has to be kind of ingested or injected. The whole idea that you can kind of breathe it in and get sick over it, again, it's a lie. And the mask is kind of foolish. And if you're wearing the mask, you're actually, so here I see some of my friends, even my family, right, will go out and I'll say, I can't believe you're wearing the mask. Mom, this is what my son said. Mom, you go out in the car. I'll handle it. I'm like, but you're catering to the illusion, honey. You're making people think that this is real, right? Like you have to kind of take the mask off. It's not hurting. But if you're wearing the mask, you're part of the problem. You see? You're part of the problem, because other people see you wearing the mask and they think, oh, that must be true because they're wearing it too. You have to be the change. You have to be the one to liberate others. I have not worn a mask since this thing came on. Now, I've been denied service at some place, like the Life Salon Spa in Dartmouth. I've been denied service at a spa, Summit Spa, Spirit Spa for massage, and Erica Berger denied to treat me if I didn't have my mask. So what I didn't support their businesses. In fact, I'm going to talk about it as people that are unawake, are ignorant of the true history, because this is what we need to do. We need to reward businesses, right, that are looking after our humanity, and we need to kind of reprimand businesses that are forcing us into a muzzle. Right? So what I did, I also sent a complaint to the Massage Therapy Association, to the Physiotherapy Association, and to the Cosmetology Association of Nova Scotia, CC'd Robert Strang, that I promised I would hold personally liable for any of these injuries about vaccines and masking and COVID lockdowns. And hopefully through the Common Law Assembly, it's going to happen. But you have to do it too. People say, oh, Dina, thank you. I'm so happy for your voice. Well, yeah, thank you, but I'm one person. If we all took off our masks and refused to shop places where they make us wear one, and we complain and we outline the businesses that are really not taking care of our humanity, we win. The pandemic idea would stop, because the true pandemic, as my dear friend Donna said in Australia, is fear. Fear is how they hold you captive. Right? It's having some courage to stand in truth and justice gives you energy. When you're aligned kind of with God and the earth and taking care of your fellow men, you know, when you're aligned with humanity, that gives you power and strength. If you're hiding in the corner with your mask on, masking up your kids, my God, right? You'll be just living in fear and anxiety for your whole life. So it comes a time when we have to take responsibility for ourselves and for our own health and for our family and make a change. So let's talk about what's happening now in Australia and the UK. In Australia, they have lockdowns. They have military people going through the streets. In the UK, they have curfews. They have to be in at a certain time. The populations are starting to protest, but you won't see that on the news. You won't see the protests and the thousands in the street, because they don't want you to know. They want to keep you awake. But just like Australia and the UK, Canada is one of those countries in the Commonwealth. So the mask is just the first step, right? It's just their first phase. The next is going to be, again, quarantining the kids, taking the kids away from you unless they have the vaccine, restricting your movement, which they've already started. I just drove back from a freedom rally in New Brunswick, and you wouldn't believe the number of army tanks. I've probably seen 10 army tanks on the street. Never seen that before. They're liberating. They're mobilizing the forces, just like they did in the UK and Australia. So we don't have time. You know, this is why I did this video today. I thought, you know what? I don't have time to sugarcoat it anymore. I just have to kind of tell it like it is. And then you have a choice. You can either wake up to and stand up for truth and justice, or you can go back into the shadows and hide with your mask and, you know, under that government tyranny. And this is what it is, government tyranny, really, right? Because these countries, these Commonwealth countries, are ruled by the crown. That's why they call Canada a crown corporation. It's a corporate structure. When you're born, you're registered, and you're registered as an asset, really. Your birth certificate is an asset. So they know they can make a certain amount of money from you in your taxes over your lifetime. So you're actually a commodity, just an asset for the corporation of Canada. That means you have to do whatever that corrupt lizard queen recommends. Now, you'll say, why, Dina, don't call her a lizard. Well, you have to call it as you see it. Anyone that puts a 5G technology in place that they know causes cellular damage, that puts their name on a virus that they're wanting to spread across the world, although it didn't work very good because now we're catching on to it, you know, creates this corruption, who wants to sex traffic kids, who's involved in the sex trafficking of kids out in BC, who takes kids and uses their blood, adrenochrome, as a drug to sell the I mean, so she's a lizard. Only reptiles drink the blood of their kids, no? It's crazy, but this is what we're ruled under. So all these MPs, all the MLAs, all the lawyers, because the lawyers have Queen's Counsel, the judges are all under this corruption. That was a hard reality for me to kind of see, because then I felt like in bondage, trapped into a system. If you think it comes all the way from the Queen of England and all the Commonwealth countries, right? Then I start researching common law. and watching Kevin Annett, some of his videos, reading his books. I have some of his books here, actually, that I wanted to read some passages out from that. Christopher James, Cal Washington. I mean, these are all guys that are understanding this paradigm, how Canada is a corporate entity. And as a corporate entity, as you have a birth certificate and you're signed into that, you're signed into their paradigm. So this is how they can do a lockdown procedure. This is how they can put this mandatory measures or like a War Measures Act in place. You know, we're still in a state of emergency. Isn't that kind of funny? How would they still put us in a state of emergency? Unless they can only enact this legislation of mandating and forcing us to do things when they have this legislation in place. So, the way out, this is the key. Sovereignty is your success. You have to remove yourself from that corruption in order to create sovereignty. That means natural liberties of healthy water, healthy food, you know, the right to breathe, the right to own land. You have to come out of that paradigm. Now, you can do both at the same time. Every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Atlantic time, I've been doing a Zoom with Kevin Annett, and we're going to have some other guest speakers come in. But if you're interested, you can contact me through healthtruth.blog, and you can join our Zoom call. It's recorded, and then I also post it onto Facebook and onto my YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and look at the previous ones that we've done, Dina Churchill, my YouTube channel, I'll see if I can post that video in underneath this as well. But you learn a lot. Sovereignty is your success. So if we can create a sovereign nation outside of that paradigm, which they've already created, the Republic of Canada, Kanata, and the website is the Republic of Canada, you can look that up, we can then take back our power, our people power, right? Then we can come out of that. So this is the first question when I start talking about this to people. They say, well, it doesn't work. How can we arrest people? How can we have power over like our governments and our police force and whatever? The power has always been in the people. The power is in the people. It's just that the people don't believe it yet, right? We've actually elected these We've elected these men in the government to do these things for us, to not speak up, to have their testicles removed so they don't have a voice, and they're just puppets for the people at the top who are in dysfunctional positions, right? So we have the power, we just don't believe it yet. That's what Henry Ford says, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So part of the problem is us. Part of the problem is our mindset, because we've forgotten how powerful we are. And that's intentional, right? So they've changed the frequency, right? They changed the frequency of our music back in the 1940s to affect our brain function. They've put fluoride in the water that calcifies the pineal gland. Now they're doing these tests with these, thermometers, right? Here at the pineal gland. So the infrared affects your pineal gland. They want you to forget your power and your spirituality and your connection to that matrix. They want you to forget that what you do to the world is what you do to yourself. They want you to forget about our humanity. They want you to forget about kind of love and wisdom and gratitude that gives you power. And they've almost done it, right? Many of us are running around in a mask, afraid of this boogeyman virus that they've created. They're brainwashing you. So we have to wake up to that. So Gandhi says, when the government becomes lawless or corrupt, it's our sacred duty to resist. Now, I would say we can't just resist, because that keeps us in the same paradigm. This is what I've been doing for 2 years with the government. Resisting, right? I'm not wearing a mask. I was resisting, not vaccinating, talking about vaccines. We didn't vaccinate our kids, I was resisting. But eventually, it's like pulling on, it's like having a tug of war, right? It tires you out, because you're constantly having to resist. You're constantly having to push back. The key is, let go of the rope. They fall on their ass. You have to let them go. When I figured out I was going to do this, it was so liberating. All of a sudden I could feel my depression starting to lift, and I had renewed energy and renewed enthusiasm in the process of owning my own power and owning my own sovereignty and taking back what I had so willingly given up to our Canadian corporate structure, let's say. I did a talk this weekend at in New Brunswick, in Fredericton, at the Freedom Rally. So thank you to Brenda and to Gitan and the other people that kind of took me at last minute, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get there. But I did a talk, and I used the word corruption too many times. And this old Indian Micmac chief. He's not that old, but he's been an Indian chief since the 1600s. So he's has a heredity. You know, he's one of the most powerful Micmac chiefs in this area. And we had dinner together afterwards, and I was just so eager to find out this information, because the Aboriginal people, the Micmac, he wants me to say Micmac, not Aboriginal. He goes, this is what we are in Atlantic Canada as Micmac. The Micmac have a sovereign nation. I mean, they've been pulling away that from them, but they have power. So I'm learning a lot, not only from people like Kevin and Annette and, Cal Washington and those guys, but also from our founding fathers, right? The Micmac chief. But anyway, he said, if I just give you one piece of advice, I said, yes, I want to eat up all what you can tell me, share what you can do. And the first thing was that he was honoring women. He said our women are sacred, and that just opened my heart, because I think this is really what's shifting the paradigm, is the understanding of the feminine divine, right? Masculine thinks linearly. They're to act, where the feminine is a very receptive, warm, global, and not just females, but a feminine energy that understands how our actions affect ABCD. They're not just looking at how it affects one thing. They're looking at how the chemicals that you're spraying over the trees are destroying the hardwoods, are getting into our groundwater. They're ending up in the breast milk of mothers. It's this feminine wisdom that's shifting the paradigm. So that was the first reminder that it was the Aboriginals and this particular chief that had women even added to our constitution in Canada. But, and then when we were walking, I was saying to my mom, the two chiefs were on either side, and they were sort of 2 steps or half a step behind me. I felt like I was some, I don't know, important god or something. I don't know, they were just sort of supporting. And that really helped me understand the difference between these global elitists, right, that are putting women and children down, that are enlisting them in the sex slave trade. But a true man, right, understands the wealth in our next generation, and is not afraid to stand up for that. Despite persecution, despite what your neighbor is going to think, they stand up for their kids. They don't send them back into the school system with a mask on their face and feed them chemicals in their processed foods, right? So it's a whole idea, it's a philosophy change. But the chief said, you said the word corruption too many times. Well, he didn't say it that way. He said, we have to focus on what we want instead of what we don't want. And I know that, and I teach that, but in that talk that I did use the word corruption a lot. So now I'm just going to call it dysfunction within our system. Misalignment to something that's higher authority, God, man, and the land. The queen is not my authority. I'm sorry, but, I hold no allegiance to that old lizard. And once you say that to yourself and you move out of that paradigm, that's when you start owning your sovereignty. That's when you start being responsible for you as a person and your health. And that's when we kind of shift the paradigm. I spoke to a global leader in one of the freedom movements who was from New Brunswick. And he asked me to do an interview with him. I said, I'd love to. And he said, I just find, Atlantic Canadians are really complacent, and they're not really engaged, in some of the other areas in Canada and other countries. We have thousands protesting in the street. And he said, I just don't know, they're happy to kind of sit at home and go with the program. And I thought about that for a moment. I grew up in Newfoundland. And, I think Atlantic Canadians are the salt of the earth. And I think the biggest obstacle for us is that we have a faith in humanity. It's our biggest obstacle, but it's also going to be our greatest strength. Because it's hard to believe these things. It's hard to believe that the government would impose these regulations and will create a global scandemic for the whole world if you believe in the goodness of humanity. So we have to kind of harness that to educate people. to hold a loving space for the transformation and realize that if they're not aware of these things, it's because, not because they're just unintelligent, but it's because they have such faith in our humanity. And what you're doing in introducing the idea that this is a scam, it's actually hurting their own faith in our system. So what common law has done for me is helped me create a new paradigm, a paradigm that shifts the focus away from the dysfunction and corruption of that system and creates a whole new paradigm where we focus on what we want. We focus on rewriting a constitution for our people. We take back our power. And people will say the first thing, well, how does this work? Well, Kevin Annett was a global advisor with 251 delegates and had Pope Benedict resign in 2013, him and his sex-offending friends from the Vatican. So this was international common law that did that. Because the cabal, right, so the canon law or papal law, that protects all the sex offenders in the Catholic Church. That's why the pedophilia is rampant. And really, pedophilia. I mean, what man wants to kind of screw around with a kid? Only somebody that's kind of dysfunctional and feels poorly about themselves, right? You want to be with someone that is on the same level as you, intellectually, spiritually, mentally. It's only someone who feels really low about themselves and has a need to overpower that actually has sex with a kid, right? And these sex trafficking groups, right? International groups are, some of the leaders of our world are in sex trafficking. Kids like Wayfair. So if you don't know that, you can look up Wayfair. Actually sells kids online, right? Sex slaves, child sex slaves. This is criminal, but it comes from a place of feeling poor and low about themselves. We have to pity these people, really. I mean, we can think of them as evil, but I really like to look at the word evil and unwind it to a veil. They just don't know their true power. They can't attach to this love and wisdom of the universe. That's why they need to overpower. So, I don't know how I got onto that. The common law assembly is a way of taking back your power. And true sovereignty about the Pope. Oh, that's what I was saying about. So, the Pope, the papal law, and the crown are right here. Okay, so underneath here, all the crown corporations in the government, it's here. Now, and all the papal law and all the sex offenders in the Catholic Church are here, right? But the international common law goes above that. What is common law? Common law is the law of the land. Common law is our birthright. This is a statement, a manifestation of our natural liberties. Like I said, our freedom to fresh air, fresh food, fresh water, to move around freely on the land. This is our birthright. But if you don't stand up for it, it will disappear. That's why, you need to be out to these freedom rallies, right? There's going to be another one in Moncton this weekend. I'd love to see everybody there. A group of us are driving even from Halifax, to Moncton to be there for this freedom rally. Because the freedom rally, not only is it an opportunity for you to be together with people that have the same heart and mind as you and want to help our humanity, it's a statement for those around who are running around the circle with their mask on. Right? It's a way to educate. It's a way to show and hold space for the loving transformation to happen. So again, this weekend in Moncton, Freedom Rally, you really need to be there. So the Atlantic Assembly, yes, it's a statement of our sovereignty, becoming a citizen of Canada. And you can go on that site called the Republic of Canada and you can look up information there. Go read about the oath of citizenship and what it would require. You don't need to kind of take away any of the benefits within the corrupt system, the Canada Corporation. You can still be a servant to the crown if you wish, right? Subject to the crown, because you're not really a citizen of Canada. You're subject to the crown because it's a corporation. But you can still be in that system. At the same time, you can claim your citizenship, your true citizenship, right? The one that says, I have rights and freedoms and liberties, and I'm going to maintain it myself and these 12. Well, there's actually a lot more in our Atlantic Assembly, but you only need 12 people to kind of get together to create a law, then to create a sovereignty, to create a sacred contract amongst each other, and the people make the laws. This is recognized. That's why Pope Benedict, 2013, first time ever in history, stepped down from his position. If he comes out of the Vatican right now, he'll be arrested under international common law. So, again, if you're interested in that, Kevin Annett, Murder by Decree, you can look at my YouTube channel. The last 2 Zooms are uploaded onto my YouTube channel, and Kevin's books, so I should talk about that too. Also, if you want information on the masks and the testing, healthtruth.blog. I've wrote extensively there as I'm learning, and as you're sharing information with me, I'm putting it back into my articles. And again, thank you for all those sent in articles. If I don't get back to you right away, no, I'm grateful, and I'll eventually get there. But I just feel like we're running out of time, and I try to kind of do what I can to be most efficient. It might not be joining up to a group, somebody tags me, I don't tag them back. You know, it's not that I don't love you, it's just sometimes I don't see it, or again, I'm just trying to be most efficient, most effective, most purposeful in my actions. And right now I think there's 5,000 friends here and 12,000 followers, so I'm grateful for that. I love it when you get the information, take it out, share it with other people. And again, I'm trying to do videos, and I've created the Zoom platform so we can answer questions, and then that can be something that you can share with your loved ones to help you through this process. This week we're going to have a Zoom, and the title is going to be Sovereignty is Our Success. So I hope you kind of connect with me at healthtruth.blog, send me a message, and I'll send you the Zoom links. So again, with the international common law courts are not subject to and do not recognize any other legal or political authority, immunity or privilege, like those routinely claimed in church and state. So this is a common law training manual. You can find this again at murderbydecree.com. And this is another book called Establishing the Case for Canada. So if you want more information on what I'm talking about, this is also at, it's going to be on our website, Atlantic Common Law Assembly. Eventually we'll have it there so you can download and hopefully skip over Amazon. But right now they are on Amazon. But the Atlantic Common Law Assembly was formed September 18th here in Nova Scotia, but it represents Atlantic Canada. And we have members actually from all over Canada, members from BC and Alberta and Quebec and New Brunswick. There's 14 members from New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. I don't think we have anybody from PEI yet, but we're actually representing this and formulating, again, a group of sovereigns. We had voted, we have 6 positions now, so if you're interested in learning more about that, you can also send me a message through healthtruth.blog, and I will forward it on to our education coordinator in the Atlantic Assembly, and also our administrator, and we can help educate you more about that. But the Atlantic Common Law Assembly, again, was just recently formed. The group of national, so this is something I should talk to you about too. The National Council of Common Law Assemblies, so that is representatives from all over Canada, got together and created a law September 8th that was outlawing all these COVID measures, masking, mandatory vaccines. They created a law, an international law. Now we just need assemblies and people to understand that law to be able to uphold it. So if you have your citizen card and you have Canada and you have this law passed by the international common law, you are protected. You can show that to a police officer and he can't inject you, because this is what's coming, right? If you, again, like I said, go back to Australia and UK, and you'll see the masks are just the first phase. Next they're going to create more of a police state where they'll put curfews, lockdowns, mandatory injections. So I was really, again, like I said, feeling quite depressed about that until I found this new system. And if we can create our sovereignty and our citizenship in a new nation, which is Canada instead of the Corporation of Canada, you have protection. And the more of us there are, the greater the impact and influence we can have. So again, healthtruth.blog is my blog. Republic of Canada, Murder by Decree are all places. The healthtruth.blog, register for the Zoom. Murder by Decree, Republic of Canada is where you can find some more information. But I don't know if there's any questions. I've been ignoring you because sometimes I get distracted, but I'm going to come back. If you have any questions, you can ask just before I close out, and I'll see if I can answer them or give you my thoughts. But establishing a case for Canada, I just want to read this out to you. This came 1649. So the Magna Carta 1213 was the first kind of expression of common law. And again, this gives natural liberties, really, to our people. It's really a law that aligns, right? Man with God and the land. It's kind of that old Aboriginal way, right? That what you do to yourself, what you do to nature, and what you do to our trees, and what you do to a planet, and what you do to each other, you're doing to yourself. Because again, we're all connected in that matrix. And again, with that philosophy and understanding that there's a loving matrix around us, we act differently. We don't look at the world as kind of a predatory animal. Instead, we look at how we can engulf and create space and a loving transformation. But anyway, this came from Commons of England in 1649. It says, "The Commons of England assembled in the Parliament declare that the people under God are the origin of all just power and have supreme authority of the nation. Whatsoever is enacted and declared by law, the Commons has enforced, the Commons has the force of law." So that means the power is in the people, right? All people are included thereby, with or without consent of the king, or in our case, the corrupt lizard, queen. And then again, that was establishing the High Court of Justice, House of Commons, London, January 4th, 1649. So you see, we, the people, are powerful. We create a structure. And a common law assembly, all you need is 12 people. We had 28 people sign our charter, and it was 8 in proxy. And like I said, most of the members from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, but members from all over the country. So if you can't find a common law assembly near you, and you can find that at the Republic of Canada, you can connect with us, and you can connect with me, and I'll help you. And what I've said to a lady in Quebec and the 2 ladies that we have in Alberta, or 3 ladies in Alberta, is, you can be with us and you can learn, and then you can grow your group locally, and then you can create your own assembly eventually. But you can, all are welcome here in Atlantic Canada. We have kind of an open policy, and we just need to kind of register you and make sure you're who you are, and that you're not wanting to kind of let's say hijack our process. So we have kind of a little screening, that's why the Zoom links, you have to connect with me personally to get that, or you can go back and look at the recording ones again on the YouTube. So healthtruth.blog is where you can find information on the masking and the PCR tests and the research, and again, the Republic of Canada, murderbydecree.com. I don't know if that was all that I wanted to say. I've said a lot. And so now let me look and see if there's any questions. There's no one standing up here. Gail, there is. In Newfoundland, there's a group called No Masks, No Mask Newfoundland. Connect with Carrie Churchill. She knows about that. So there are people standing up, but they need more people to support, because they were out in front of Confederation Building in Newfoundland, and there was just a few. And you can also join our Common Law Assembly. Send me an email, Gail, Carrie. I think Carrie has some information, but Newfoundlanders, there's probably about 5 or 6. I know Craig is helping me out there, Renata, but we have members there. We just need more members. And like I said, you're welcome here to do that first. And, it's no excuse to think there's no one else around doing it, because we were down in the City Hall here in Halifax. And, the first day, I think there were 8 or 9 of us there, right? And then it just grew. And then, at the end, at our freedom rallies, we were having hundreds. But it always starts with one person. And when you are living the change, when you're being the change, you're liberating others to do the same. But you have to be the one to start it, right? You can't sit back and wait for someone else. This is part of having a sovereign mind and heart, is being able to stand up for truth and justice when there's no one else around, right? This is just your true strength and your love for humanity. And if you're doing that, if you're here right now, if you're watching, you are a leader. If you have succumbed, if you've risen above the chemicals that they put in our food and water, if you're onto the narrative and you're not being brainwashed to think there's a foolish pandemic out there, if you're somehow onto kind of sex slavery, not afraid to kind of bring to the light people like John DeMartini or Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau, right, had the whole Lavalin scandal was connected to Nexus. That's a sex trafficking business. Justin Trudeau also gave in 2017 $20 million to the Clinton Sex Slavery Foundation. So the whole Democratic Party, if you don't know this already, go to my YouTube channel, you'll see it there too. But the Black Lives Matter movement is actually just a funding for the Democratic Party. right? So, you know, whatever you think or don't think about Donald Trump, you know, he had his own money. He's not like, you know, the Democratic Party putting Hillary Clinton, who was into all these things, right? She was kind of a mouthpiece for this corruption. GMO foods she wanted as a platform. She's big into sex trafficking, right? The adrenochrome, and you can look all those things. Pharmaceuticals, she wanted mandatory injections. You know, she was, like, okay, I don't know much about politics, but really, I would be quite scared. No, I am quite scared. I can't really talk about the U.S. politics because we have Justin up there, right? Doing mass murders and suicide, mass genocide out in BC. And he's connected with the sex trafficking slave, connected with the queen, supplying the queen with her, you know, kids that she can, you know, get the adrenochrome. So adrenochrome is something that's injected out of their blood. It's actually oxidized adrenaline. So they have to scare the kids in different experiments. This is what the DUMBs are, deep underground military bases. So the governments in this corporation, Canada corporation, underneath the ground has these DUMBs, deep underground military bases, where they do experiments on kids. They do kind of cloning. They do, you know, inject them with things. They extract their bloods. It's horrible. So you say, why do you call her a lizard? Because that's what she is. How can you do this to our humanity? Crimes against humanity. So, sex trafficking business. If you know of someone, regardless who they are, Prime Minister, personal development coach, John DeMartini, whoever it is, you have to bring it to light and you have to talk about it. Because if you don't, the wound festers. It only heals when you bring it to the light, as Rumi says. The wound is the place where the light enters. Now, where was I going with that? I keep forgetting what I wanted to say, and I keep getting distracted. But so the common law is a way that you can stand up for your own sovereignty. Oh, it's raining here. It's so beautiful. It reminds me of when I was young and used to sit in the car, and my grandmother would tell me stories. The common law, and what do you want to do? Let your action steps right now. Number one, keep exposing that which is in alignment with God, man, and the land. Right? All these dark, deep agendas, they don't hold power once you bring it to light. But it does when you try to cover it up. So take off the mask. This is a symbolic thing. To take off the mask is your refusal, right, to submit to their agenda. This is very important. It's not even about your health. It's not even about how kids die with the mask and the chemicals, breathing in the chemicals in the mask. This is a psychological experiment. This is a psychological experiment against your spirit, against your understanding of who you are and your humanity and your connection to God and the land. This is the foundation of this whole thing. You know, back last year when they were trying to mandate vaccines in New Brunswick, Bill 39, they were trying to scare us, right? They were trying to, mumps outbreak, polio outbreak, measles outbreak. The friggin' vaccine was causing the outbreaks, and they were trying to scare it. So the people like me, who never had the mumps, who had the mumps and measles, weren't really scared by it. So then they had to create this whole new pandemic, this whole new boogeyman virus to try to scare someone into the vaccine. Don't fall for it, please. Don't fall for it. So keep exposing this agenda. Keep talking about it. Keep sharing about it. People won't agree with you. I guarantee you, just as many people will support you, people will hate you. CBC dragged my name for 2 years into the media. I was delusional. I was an anti-vaxxer. I was, you know, I don't know, whatever. Whack job. I mean, I get people delete me and call me names every day. But too bad, right? And there'll be other people that will really like what you say. So you can't get caught up on either side. Because if you're just looking at the people that really think that you're doing a good thing and they're praising you, you'll be elated. And if you just see the people that are, you know, coming down on you, and that'll be your friends and family that you hold dearest, they'll pack the biggest punch, then you'll be depressed. But if you know in your own heart that you're standing for truth and justice, you don't need anyone else around you. You don't need to have your spouse or your parents or your kids on board. You just stand in your own truth. And when you do, it's almost like it opens up the powers of creation to put things in your path to help you. Because, again, this loving universe wants our humanity to survive, right? It wants our humanity to survive. And it's going to reward and it's going to give you strength and courage to do what you need to do when you're standing in that alignment. So keep exposing the rod. Be the change you want to see, as Gandhi says again, right? Be the change. Be the change. Be the example. You don't need, if there's nobody in Newfoundland that you can see around you, take your sign like we did in New Brunswick last year. There was only 6 of us walking up and down the street in front of CBC New Brunswick talking about the dangers of vaccine. It has to start somewhere. And if you're asking the question, it means it's you. So be the change you want to see. And the last thing I'm going to mention is really that you have to understand and inspire others to do the same thing. Not from a place of resentment, not from a place of feeling angry or calling them names, right? Calling them sheep, calling them ignorant, calling them whatever names that we have. That just creates more of a wedge. It creates a divide. It's like us and them. We have to see it for what it is and then create a loving space for that transformation to happen. Usually starts with education. I love humor. Humor's always a good thing, right? When I see somebody that's afraid that I don't have a mask, I just go, boo, boo, just scare them, just kind of, humor's a good way, but in your heart, if you hold that loving vibration, if you can say, I am love, I give and receive love, everything I touch turns into a loving vibration. If you hold that mindset, and you hold that heart set, everybody in your sphere will feel it. But it starts with you. So I don't know. I think I've talked on and on. Thank you, Diane. Diane Doucette had a beautiful speech in New Brunswick on the weekend at the Freedom Rally. Thank you for that. Her and Barb Dempsey are 2 wonderful, strong, divine women that are really kind of speaking their heart. Barb is a grandmother, and she's just, she has at her heart, right, what's happening to her grandkids, and she wants to speak. So somebody said to me, came up, makes me emotional, grateful, emotional, but someone came up on the weekend, and this has happened many times. Julie, Ricky's girlfriend, Julia, and a lady on the weekend at the Freedom Rally, and they said, we're not really professional speakers, and we're really nervous about speaking, and I've never spoken out before at a mic, but I'm doing it now. That opens my heart, because those people have arisen out of their own fear, right, of being ostracized from their community, being reprimanded by their family, being, reprimanded at their job and their corporate position, maybe. They have risen above their own personal fears to give a greater service to our humanity. This is what's required now. This is what's required. Are women like Diane and Barb and this blonde lady whose name just escapes me, who approached me after the meeting, and I didn't say to her at the time, but so inspiring. So this is what I'm doing. If you're not happy, if you don't find this information useful, I would ask you to just delete me from the Facebook page. You can still follow along and watch, but I really love to have people around me like this, people that will overcome their own fear to change the current program, right? This is inspiring. To see someone rising out of their own fears for a greater service is what we're all called to do right now. And if you're here and you're listening, you are a leader. If you're not wearing a mask, you have to lead. So some websites, Rebel News has a mask exemption, maskexemption.ca. Hugs Over Mask, another great website. You can print off mask exemptions there. You can share it with other people. You can give it to them as a resource to understand how the mask is a big scam. My blog, healthtruth.blog, we have Del Bigtree and the High Wire comes on every week. Del's been great. Children's Health Defense with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And we're now having a Children's Health Defense here in Canada. We're starting that. Isn't that great? So thank you to Robert Kennedy Jr. And, I really feel like he's part of living that legacy, right? His uncle, John Kennedy, who was in 1962, had said this, right? They said that, he said, there's a plot in place to enslave every man, woman, and child, and before I leave this noble office, I intend to expose it. So that was, 2 weeks before he was assassinated. But he understood. He understood this whole idea of one world government, right? The Agenda 2030, the whole idea behind kind of the chemtrails. He understood that the whole plan was kind of to enslave our humanity, and he was going to expose it. So I really feel like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Children's Health Defense is sort of carrying that mission through, as we all are. Rocco with Vaccine Choice Canada. So Rocco is a constitutional lawyer and has been hired by Vaccine Choice Canada to, again, sort of highlight and fight these government measures that are so unconstitutional and the corruption. So when we all come together, the line is another force of evolution, revolution. Help me out here. If there's any others that I'm forgetting, other resources for people who might be new to this information, Vaccine Choice Canada, Children's Health Defense, Del Bigtree, The High Wire, Robert Scott Bell's show I like, Aaron and Health Nut News, Joe Mercola, Dr. Judy Merkovitz. So it's showing that I have a low battery. I'm going to have to go. But if you think of any other resources you want to put in there, please do. We love it because we're a team. We're working together. So be the change. HealthTruth.blog. You can email me, send me a message if you want information on the Zoom calls that we do. Republic of Canada, if you want to learn how to be a citizen of Canada outside the Canadian corporation, really take back your power and be the change that you want to see. So this is Dr. Dina Churchill, inviting you to reach for the stars, envision and achieve your personal best, and most of all, try to enjoy the journey because humor is healing too. Thank you.